This is me, simulating a world on my computer. But can we expand this? Build a computer powerful enough to simulate a whole universe, with its own physics, its own stars, and billions of beings who all believe they are real? Probably. So how can we be sure we're not inside one right now? Some of the smartest thinkers alive believe we are.
Well, the argument for the simulation, I think, is quite strong.
Musk says that we're living in a simulation.
I wish I had a good argument against that hypothesis, and I do not.
Would follow that there would be many more simulated experiences of our kind than there would be original experiences of our kind.
But they're all wrong. We are not in a simulation, and I can prove it. The core idea of the simulation theory is that our current reality is not real, but is in fact an advanced simulation through a machine, like a computer. The theory proposes that highly advanced beings, the simulators, exist in a higher level universe or timeline. These beings developed technology sophisticated and advanced enough to create a detailed simulation that encompasses an entire universe, with its own physics, its own stars, and its own beings capable of consciousness. That's the one we are currently experiencing. The simulators could be many things. Possibilities include hyper-advanced future humans running a simulation of the past, extraterrestrial life forms creating a simulated universe for study, essentially anything or anyone with the requisite power to create such a simulation. One possible motivation is to run a massive number of simulations, perhaps billions or even trillions, to test how different simulated societies or universes respond to a specific variable or problem. Imagine a civilization far beyond our intelligence and technological capabilities. Let's call them the axioms. These axioms aren't just a little smarter than us. They are millions of times more advanced and far more intelligent. They create a project to run billions of simulations designed to test one thing: how different civilizations create and then handle superintelligence. In this scenario, we are one of those simulations. Since the axioms are studying the development of superintelligence, it's very likely they have created the simulation only a few weeks or days ago, in our time. Now, of course, we have memories from years ago, history books centuries old, and even fossils from over 100 million years back. But they don't care about the eons leading up to this moment. They could have simply baked in all that ancient history and our personal memories in advance. Think of it like a video game. The characters have coded memories and personalities. But unlike simple NPCs with dialogue trees, we are fully conscious thinking beings living within this program. This simulated reality has constraints too. They don't need to waste processing power to simulate the whole universe. This explains many cosmic mysteries. The strange lack of observable alien life, why dark matter seems to magically hold galaxies together, and why we are stuck within the incredibly slow cosmic limit of the speed of light. It's all just the efficient construction of our simulated world. So where's the proof for the simulation theory? While I believe there is none, which we'll get to shortly, many believe it's a matter of simple statistics. The argument is pretty straightforward. If a civilization became advanced enough to create billions of simulations with conscious beings, and if even a tiny fraction of those simulated worlds created their own simulations, the numbers quickly become staggering. What you end up with is a single base reality, the original real universe, and virtually an infinite number of simulated realities layered underneath it. It's a pyramid that grows exponentially bigger. Therefore, the likelihood of our reality being the one single true base reality is extraordinarily small. It's essentially 1 divided by the highest number you could imagine to throw on here. While the math seems compelling, these huge abstract numbers simply become meaningless in the practical sense. They represent a philosophical possibility, not hard, testable proof of our existence. Before we can move forward, there's a story I must tell you first. Picture a perfectly black, theoretical oven. a black body. When you heat it up, it glows. This is classical physics, the accepted wisdom of the 19th century. This glow even had a formula to perfectly predict it. It was a statistical certainty. No physicist would even dare to challenge it. It was known as the Rayleigh-Jeans law. The law worked well for visible light, but the numbers held a scary prediction. As we looked at shorter, higher energy wavelengths, like ultraviolet and beyond, the math showed something impossible. It predicted the oven would not just glow, but emit an infinite amount of energy. All the predictions, all the statistics, and all the established math lined up. It was a flawless path to a catastrophic conclusion. Every hot object in the universe should instantly radiate all its energy and vanish. It was known as the ultraviolet catastrophe. Keep this bit in mind as we move on. The primary argument often used to try and disprove the simulation theory relies on our current understanding of physics. To simulate an entire universe, you would need a computer at least the size of that universe, if not bigger. However, the argument doesn't really hold up for two reasons. As discussed, the axioms or the simulators would probably only simulate a small, focused chunk of space, the area where we exist and interact with. They would not waste massive resources simulating every unobserved atom in the universe. And secondly, this argument assumes that the simulators are bound to the same laws of physics as we are. Their reality and thus their technology could operate on entirely different, vastly more efficient principles. Another common argument focuses on our current technological limits. Since we can't create a realistic, conscious simulation, people argue that we must either be the very top of the simulation chain, the true base reality, or at the very bottom of a long layer chain. This, they claim, reduces the impossible odds from 1 in almost infinite down to a simple 50-50 chance. But this ignores the likely pyramid structure of the simulation chain. We're either at the single unique top layer, or one of the gazillions of simulations at the bottom layers, all of which, just like us, have not yet been able to produce their own simulations. Therefore, the simple 50-50 breakdown is likely inaccurate. If we go back to our oven, people decided to create real-world experiments, and as it turned out, our heated black-body ovens didn't explode. They simply glowed, exactly as expected. The energy was manageable. The universe was not collapsing into an infinite ultraviolet inferno. The classical physics predictions soared right off the charts, but the actual measured data smoothly rolled back down to zero energy at the shortest wavelengths. The established rules of science, which had worked for centuries, seemed completely broken. The experiment was right, but the math was wrong. This was a massive crisis. The most trusted methods of predictions, the equations that describe everything from falling apples to planetary orbits, were suddenly unable to describe something as simple as a hot stone. The universe simply refused to obey the simple, logical, mathematical outcome, which leads me to my first of 3 arguments on why we are not living in a simulation. Numbers don't tell the whole story. The statistics and massive numbers presented by the simulation believers are ultimately meaningless, because as it turned out in the black body experiment, the numbers weren't necessarily wrong, but they were misleading. They were missing the most important piece of the puzzle. The expected outcome was false. The statistics were solid, the predictions were perfectly logical, and the math was absolutely correct based on the available data. Yet the catastrophe never happened. The entire structure of classical physics, which said energy flowed continuously, was the hidden flaw. In 1900, Max Planck realized that to make the math fit the reality, he had to assume energy came in tiny, discrete packets, or quanta. This quantum theory was deeply counterintuitive, but it completely resolved the crisis. The statistical and mathematical predictions had been completely accurate in their own framework. But the framework was wrong. This reveals an interesting truth. Sometimes even when the data, statistics, and mathematics are perfectly consistent, an incomplete premise can lead to an expectation that is totally and dramatically false. History is littered with many more examples where numbers, models, and math all logically predicted one outcome. Yet reality turned out to be completely different and unpredictable. The burden of proof relies entirely on the theory's believers. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Until there's undeniable, testable evidence that we are not in a simulation, then we are not in a simulation. And claiming that we are in one is like claiming that I'm made of pure hydrogen, because statistically by far it's the most common element in the universe. But if that doesn't convince you, my two arguments surely will. Number 2, the narcissism of humanity. The second argument is rooted in basic ego, believing that our specific time period, or even the human species itself, is so important or fascinating that godlike beings would dedicate immense resources to try and simulate it is purely egotistical and narcissistic. Why would beings millions of times more capable and intelligent than us bother simulating this reality? To them, we are like ants. Imagine us putting ants in separate pebbles and spending decades obsessively observing how they breathe just to advance human technology. It makes no sense. The complexity of running a conscious simulation seems entirely disproportionate to the knowledge they would gain. Why would we even claim that if these beings do exist, they would progress themselves forward by creating something as simple as a simulation? To them, we probably appear as advanced as goldfish appear to us. A goldfish isn't even intelligent enough to think. Let's assume for a moment that we do live in the base reality. Aren't we already being simulated by the very laws of nature? Since the Big Bang, quintillions of cause and effect events have happened in sequence, all nudging things and us to be exactly where we are right now. Whether we're being simulated by some magical sci-fi supercomputer or by the fundamental deterministic powers of nature, the result is the same. It's just a pedantic difference in terminology. We can push this idea further. The only thing you truly know is what's inside your head. The electrical signals firing in your brain are fundamentally no different than the ones firing inside a sophisticated computer chip. Outside of your thoughts, nothing else can be proven as real. Without getting too deep, that's what makes us alive. Our ability to feel is our reality. And what feels real must be believed as real, or else you'll drive yourself insane. Ultimately, until there is concrete physical evidence, and I mean real, testable proof, not just those abstract, useless statistics, no one can definitively claim we live inside of a simulation. So hopefully now you can rest easy, knowing that we do not live in a simulation. The universe is messy, weird, and complicated, but that's exactly what makes it real. So yeah.